There's a lot of videos out there, myself included, where I take a look at something that's going with the industry. I take a look at something I think can be improved in the industry, or something that's maybe not going well, or should change. And in some cases, it winds up, no matter how hard you try, it winds up being negative. But it's important to remember that there are a lot of positive things, and comics in many ways are as good as they've ever been in terms of their potential. That's a pretty important statement there at the end. But let's talk about kind of take a step back here and really look at what we're playing with. Hey, everybody, this is Perch. This is an interesting kind of dialogue because it requires you to kind of step out of yourself for a moment. It's very easy with any topic to get really consumed by kind of the negatives and the problems, because problems are actionable. Things that are working, you just enjoy. So your mind and you know enjoy those things, you work with those things, but you don't need to actually invest work into change. You don't need to. It's not, put it this way. I heard this analogy once. If you have a splinter in your finger, it hurts. It's a reminder. It's there. It's bad. You need to go dig it out. Maybe you need to get the tweezers or a needle or something. You need to get that splinter out of there so you can then heal and be back to normal. Even if after it's out, it still is painful for a while until it gets back to normal. When you have a splinter, you're thinking about it. But most of the time, like 90, hopefully, 90, depending on what you do with your life, 99% of the time, you have no splinter. Your hand's just fine, and you don't think about it. You don't wander around thinking about your hand. You use your hand. That sounds pervy, but anyway, you do things. You write, you other stuff, whatever you happen to do with your hand. You don't think about your hand. It's just part of you. And so that's why in a lot of these videos, a lot of commentary about comics, people gravitate toward the things that are broken. Those are the things that are actionable. Those are the things where you need to invest time into, what are some other ideas? How do we make it work? Um, but in general, the comics industry is the potential. That's why I'm choosing my words very carefully. The potential of the comic industry is really good right now. Now, why do I say it? Because we'll just go down the list. The tools, the ways to actually create comics, both from drawing them, writing them, sharing the information to the other part of your team to get it made, the sending it to a printer, the preparing, color separated PDF files or whatever it happens to be. I mean, all the different, let's get your EPS files off to the printer. The mechanism by which you create, communicate, assemble the comics, send it to this printer, all that kind of stuff is probably as good now as it's ever been. There's just more tools, better tools. There's traditional pen and paper. There's digital. There's stuff you could do with tablets and smart. There's many ways to create a comic. It's never been more accessible to make a comic, and the options for getting them printed, for getting them distributed, are as good as they've ever been. We haven't had a world where these options are available to us at this form. We also have more variety of comics and more variety of people who can make them. And what I mean by that is there are, if you want to go find a colorist for your comic book, 20 years ago, you might have to go to a con, you might have to talk to people in your network, you might have to dig up some references, call them, whatever else. Today, I was noticing the other day there was somebody on Fiverr, which is kind of sad in itself. Fiverr is a website. You can go get gigs done. Start as like $5 to get you a gig done, but lots of people have different, prices that they do. So you can go on Fiverr and get comic book coloring, colorist there. You can get people who will do inks for you at cheap rates. And there's reviews, there's testimonials, there's ways you can try out the work. There's options for finding people to basically get your comic produced that you didn't have before. And the amount of comics I mentioned earlier, the variety of what's out there in the market is huge. We haven't had this, almost any kind of genre you could think of is now available as a comic. And if it isn't, then you can pretty much, make it You could commission it. You could make some noise, and somebody will get it done for you. These are powerful things. The broken part of comics, as I mentioned, the only part that is not arguably the best it's ever been, is the distribution where to find comics, and that's only true if you're talking about physical printed books, because the digital world, there's more places than ever before to actually get digital content out there. You've got Webtoon, you've got Comixology, you've got just putting your stuff on a WordPress created site. I mean, if you go and you could basically, I saw a web host that was offering free hosting, free WordPress, all the rest. I mean, not free, but your first year of all this stuff is free, and then after that it was like $4.95 a month. And if you want to and you're inclined, you could set up, you could do your own distribution. The availability of comics digitally is, still has a lot of things that need to happen and a lot of progress, but it's better than it ever has been. Now, print wise, that's our dark mark. That's where there's just not enough places selling comics in general. But you have to almost take a step back and look at the world. Retail in general is going through a problem. Really. By the way, as an aside, I saw that somebody was trying a new approach where they basically went to the printer, got the printer to print up the comics, and then they vended their comics through Amazon, or that's their plan. I don't know if they've actually done this or not. So that's interesting. So now we can use Amazon as a discovery mechanism for our printed books. We've got crowdfunding options. We've got lots of different ways to make comics. So given all that, again, we're taking a step back. People get too hung up, or you can get not hung up. That's the wrong word, but you can get distracted by quote unquote woke Marvel, or the SJWs in comics, or the Nazis in comics, depending on which team you play for on any given day. There's lots of that kind of drama going on, but the table is set, probably with the exception of distribution, probably as good as it ever has been for comics. All the pieces are there. And why that's such an important point, and why I really stress on that, is that because all the pieces are there, it really then comes down to the talent of the people who can assemble those pieces to make something out of this industry. And I'll throw this out there. I think that generally when you're talking about disruption, so if you're not in the tech field, you may not have heard the terms used this way, but typically you have an industry, and the industry, it grows, it then stabilizes. It then gets into, there's different words they've used, a legacy state or a static state, where things are progressing, but it's not growing. The exponential curve of growth has stopped, and you're not really seeing innovation. You're not really seeing. You're just seeing the industry kind of live with the market, adjust to the market, not disrupt it. And by the way, you never, in any industry, you can't have constant disruption. You have to have a balance between a little bit of disruption and then a little bit of stabilization. Disruption, stabilization. You have to keep going back and forth. It's kind of, you try something new, you shake up the market, you then let it settle a little bit. So, life is feeling pretty good, and then you disrupt it again to make improvements. And so that's what comics needs, and this is why I'm very convinced that over the next, I think, less than 5 years, we're going to get major disruption in comics. Some might argue that has already started now with DC leaving Diamond a lot of these moves. The disruption is here. What the world looks like after that disruption is a good question, but given everything that exists, we've got tools much easier to find. We've got remote work that is enabled for I have a friend who does remote work software, and lots of people do right now. And there's lots of options where that's concerned. There's availability of talent has never been bigger, and potentially with the pandemic and the shutdown and all the problems with job loss and everything else, there's a potential that the market is going to drop even further. That you're going to have more people available to do work at less. The discoverability, at least on digital, is there. So a lot of these pieces are there. So my belief is that because all these very positive elements exist within comics, somebody smart is going to come around. They're going to put those pieces together in a new and a different way, and they're going to disrupt this market huge. they're going to basically be able to enter comics in. There's somebody I was talking to. I don't you all know the name, and it's a small indie publisher, and he's had certainly a rocky year. But I respect a lot of things he's doing. I respect the price point he's achieving. I respect a lot of the pieces that he's put in place to kind of manage his business. And I think he is an innovative guy in what he tries and does. Um, but about a year and a half ago, I mentioned that I've got some money I'd like to invest. I'd like to put that money into comics. I'd like to be one of these disruptors. I'd like to really push it. And the response I got was a little surprising. It was like, well, it takes a lot of money, and it's not clear if you're going to get a return. And that's a true statement. I appreciate the honesty. So I keep in mind, I'm not bagging on the guy at all. I really appreciated the honesty. Many people, especially if you're familiar with pro wrestling, there's a term called a money mark. And what this is basically is where you have somebody who who basically is rich, or not even rich, but they're, I don't want to say foolish with their money, but they're the word gets out that this person is willing to invest money in return for a little glory of being in the business. And the wrestling, specifically, there's a wrestling promotion called TNA that had a number of people who kind of wanted the glamour of being in the wrestling business, but but the people running it knew that it was going to be a money loser and everything else, but they were happy to take money from the money mark in order to keep the business going. And that is, unfortunately, that's common. And in comics, that exists as well to some extent, especially in the indies. You'll get money marks who prop up certain things. It really shouldn't be. They don't put the effort into actually getting a good business model or put plan together. So I want to stress, I really respect the guy, and I'm not using his name because I do. I mean, this conversation was potentially in confidence, and I keep my confidence. But what was surprising to me is that I'm still looking for more people who want to go in and disrupt. I mean, truly go in and say, yeah, it's going to cost a little bit of money here, but we're going to go in and we're going to change the way comics works. Yes, it has been a money loser for a lot of people in the past. It has been a situation where, there's, it's very hard to get cash out, and it's a sinkhole in some cases. And those warnings are welcomed and appreciated. But it doesn't have to be this way, because we are not going to do things the standard way. We are going to break the rules because there's enough, like I mentioned, there's enough potential out there. There's access to talent, there's access to technology, there's access to printing options and creation options. There's anyone who wants to really take a run at digital. I think the floor is wide open to really break it open there. That's what excites me. So to wrap up this video, I think that it's important that we keep some perspective. It's very easy to get distracted by the negative things. There's certainly plenty of those. There's a lot of drama that drives negativity and drives certain cynicism about the industry. Nothing in this video should be considered optimistic. There's some people who come out and say, "Ah, you're head in the sand, optimistic." All those pieces are in place. The fact that nobody's been able to take those and really blow up and disrupt the industry doesn't mean it's not possible. It means that nobody has done it yet. And I would argue the reason why nobody's done it yet is because too many people are still looking at this whole situation and going, well, we got to keep playing by the rules. We have to keep doing it the old-fashioned way. This is the way that comics are, and so we can't change that. That's not disruptor thinking. Disruptor thinking is somebody comes in and goes, all right, what if none of the rules matter, and we don't have to adhere to anything? It's coming. It's coming in comics, and over the next 5 years, I am very excited to see that disruption play out, because it's going to be. I think it's going to be very fast. The conditions, again, if you're looking at this as if this was another industry, the conditions are way too positive right now around comics to not have it explode in a really positive way. But again, to be clear, it's not going to explode in the traditional way. It's not like Marvel is suddenly going to triple their sales overnight because they happen to publish the right mix of writer artist on Gwenpool. That's not disruption. The disruption is going to come from someone new and doing something new that really takes advantage of this space. But what do you think? Leave me your comments below. Let me know your thoughts on disruption, and do you share my I guess, let's say, optimism that comics actually has a lot of pieces in place to go huge. Just people aren't doing it yet. And it's going to take some different thinking to get it done. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications if you're into that. Follow me on Twitter or Facebook at Comic Perch, and thanks for listening.